You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Welcome to Volatility Views, the premier program for volatility traders. Each week, we'll take a deep dive into the world of volatility with in-depth analysis, trading activity reviews, strategy breakdowns, cutting-edge education, and much more. We'll also bring you exclusive conversations with the traders, researchers, and asset managers who are reshaping the volatility landscape. If it involves volatility, then you'll find it on Volatility Views. Volatility Views is brought to you by MIAX, one of the fastest options platforms in the world. MIAX is now trading options on the SPIKES Volatility Index, offering pinpoint accuracy, radically faster dissemination, and a highly transparent settlement auction for confident trading, all for competitive exchange fees. It's time to make a change and give yourself an edge with SPIKES. Learn more about SPIKES at www.miaxoptions.com/spikes. Options involve risk and are not suitable for all investors. The statements made are provided for information purposes only and are not intended to provide and should not be relied on for financial or legal advice. And now, it's time to take a deep dive into the world of volatility. It's time for Volatility Views.
All right, everybody. That music means it is time once again for Volatility Views, the premier program for volatility traders. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from this fine network. Remember, if you like what you hear on this show, on the rest of the network, make sure you leave those comments and those reviews, more importantly, in your platform of choice so other folks can continue to discover the network here in these very troubled and turbulent times we're all stuck in together. Of course, keep those questions, too. We do love hearing from you guys. You guys can hear from us live every Friday, noon Central, 1 p.m. Eastern. You know what it is. It's that Mixlr link. Once you've got it, you can set it and forget it. All of our shows come out via that same link. So you'll be notified if you follow us on Mixlr, like I know a lot of you do, the second we go live with any shows throughout the week. And you can join in, ask questions, have all sorts of fun there in the live chat. Of course, you like you after the fact, folks, too. You're just going to get it a little bit later. And joining me on the old program today, beaming in, I do believe, from his new abode there deep in the heart of Texas, he is the greasiest of meatballs, Mr. Mark Sebastian from OptionPit.com. By way of Carmen Line Capital, Mr. Meatball, welcome back to the program. How goes the new Sebastian abode, sir?
It's great. I will say that, I kept having to go back to the store for bubble wrap, and I couldn't understand how my wife could use so much bubble wrap. And now as I'm opening things, I'm realizing that my wife is the most aggressive bubble wrapper in the world. She literally bubble wrapped pots and pans, which, if you ask me, pretty aggressive.
Did she bubble wrap your children before you embarked on your cross-country journey?
You know what? We probably should have. That was the one thing that maybe you should bubble wrap. But no.
She prioritized the pots and pans.
She bubble wrapped so hard, I'm actually more likely to break something taking the bubble wrap off than it was going to break in transit.
Well, I wish you good luck unpacking and unboxing. It's quite the joyous process. I do believe I moved in this place over a decade ago, and I do believe I still have a box or two somewhere that has yet to be unpacked. So it's a joyous process as we head right on into the Volatility Review.
It's time to break down the latest developments in the volatility trading world. It's time for the Volatility Review.
right, everybody. Let's do it. Let's review some volatility. And it's another day that ends in Y. It means more weirdness afoot in the markets out here. Another green day, a pretty firm green day to end the week. So after a little spur to red the end of last week, the beginning of this week, we've seen nothing but green pretty much the rest of the week. Apparently, the COVID mania that had gripped everyone last week in the midst and in the wake of Trump's diagnosis, and of course, his subsequent kiboshing of the stimulus, all of that, a distant memory in the rearview mirror right now. All the major indices firmly in the green yet again. NASDAQ leading the charge, up about 1.33% out there. So yet again, another day of NASDAQ fully in rally ho mode. S&P looking pretty firm as well, up almost a full percent, about 0.9%. And the Dow playing the laggard today, up about 0.6%. Of course, we have seen some movement in the markets since those days. So we have seen a little bit of movement in vol. Of course, like we said last week, coming into the end of the show, we were all gripped in the midst of the Trump volatility mania. That seems to have eased now that Trump has emerged from the hospital and is threatening to go back out on the campaign trail again. Spikes come into Showtime, was at about 25 even, puts it down about exactly 4 handles. We were in the 29 range last show, so down about exactly 4 handles from last week. VIX cash coming into Showtime is at about 25.25. That puts it down a little bit less. We saw a little bit more fluidity going on out in VIX cash off the show last week. That was down about almost 2.25 points from where it was this time last week. And all this movement of vol means VVIX getting a little bit of froth back. Not a ton, but a little bit. It's at about a 108.25 coming into Showtime. That puts it up a little over 4 handles, about 4.4 handles out there. Of course, it's been threatening to break 100 again. It has done so a few times over the course of the past few weeks. Going back, that hasn't happened pretty much from the entirety of the COVID era back to February 20th. You have to go back to find the last time prior to the last couple of weeks when we actually broke 100 in VVIX. There's been enough vol to maintain it out there. Now we'll see going forward if that is still the case. The market's apparently shrugging off on the latest weird. If you like your political theater, you got your good dose of it this week. Of course, we had that vice presidential debate where I think this reinforced everyone's notion is there. Can we go vote for other? Either of these elections is coming up here as everyone proceeds to answer no questions, of course. Yet again, it's a debate where no one answers anything. And now we have, adding to the political theater, Pelosi announcing a commission on a bill to create a commission on presidential capacity. I can't even say it with a straight face, to allow Congress to intervene if they determine the president is unfit. So, of course, that's not going to have any legs. And the market apparently laughing that one off, as well as NASDAQ and everything else, up nearly a full percent today. So a lot of stuff popping off. An interesting week yet again out here, Mr. Meatball. So let's start there. What is lighting up your tape out there in the landscape of all things volatility, sir? As I say that, of course, the storm season out there in Texas apparently claiming yet another victim. There we go. Mr. Meatball, have you joined us yet again, sir? Are you back?
I'm back, and I am spectacular. Quite a day today, huh? What I would say is markets are shockingly strong. I think the interesting piece, if you're looking at volatility, is it appears that a lot of the some of the election uncertainty is evaporating out of the market. And that is kind of crazy. I'm really surprised at the way that futures have kind of fallen by the wayside over the last week. Thursday to the November futures off about 3 points, which is pretty aggressive. And I think it's because they think there's going to be an outcome to the election. I don't think the market really cares who. I think they just want an outcome.
Yeah, that appears to be the case. You are correct, because coming into today's show, we are seeing some interesting developments on the futures front. Let's get to that. Of course, Spike's futures still halted out. They're hoping to have more updates on that soon. The MIAX folks have been pretty busy acquiring everything hither and yon out there in the financial markets and launching new exchanges. So hopefully we'll hear more updates on all things Spikes in a little bit. Coming into Showtime, you're right, Mr. Meatball. We have seen quite a bit of erosion out there in that VIX futures term structure. It's like, you're right, it's like they're pricing in, they already know maybe who won. So some of that uncertainty perhaps going the way of the dodo. Some of that you expect a little bit of that in October because, we're starting to see that convergence between the front future and the cash, and ACH is reflecting that. It's not quite 2 points premium to the cash coming into showtime. It was at about 1.8 points. That puts that down over 2 handles from last show, about 2 1/3 points. So ACH coming in quite a bit. Maybe, again, not that unexpected. Let's go out to NOVE, see what's cooking out there. And the NOVE future, that's about 4 1/4 points over the cash coming into showtime. Not quite a full point, about 3/4 of a point lower out there. So NOVE still holding its juice, but not quite as much as it had this time last week. The DEES future, that was about a 3-point premium to cash coming into showtime. That puts it a little over half a handle less, about 0.6 of a point lower than it was this time last week. And Jan, an area that's always been a little bit concerning and or alarming to me, watching how much juice they were pricing into that Jan future. Because we all know 2021, that's the date everyone's looking forward to. Say, okay, let's roll the calendars ahead. Put the misery that was 2020 behind us. And if you believe the VIX futures over the last month or two, they were pricing a lot of vol going into Jan as well. There's a little bit less there, about not quite 3 points, about 2.8 points over the cash coming into showtime. That puts it off about half a handle or so from this time last week. So a lot to parse. Sounds like, Mr. Meatball, you're a little bit surprised, as I am, that we have seen as much erosion as we have out there in the VIX future since last week, sir.
I am. It was interesting, right? We saw, they broke off stimulus talks. It's pretty nutty. Like I said, I think maybe the market is feeling like there's going to be some sort of certainty around the U.S. election, and that could be it. So I don't know, but that's kind of the way things are trading right now.
Speaking of the futures and the way they're trading, before we roll on really quickly, OCC announcing their numbers for September. September was a rock'em sock'em robots month out there. The volume in September was about almost 671 million contracts, up astounding, like almost 70% from September of last year. But the more interesting number, I think, couple of them. First off, total volume for the year, 5.4 billion contracts. If you're wondering, the previous record for a year, an entire year, was 2018 with about 5.25 billion contracts. And we all know what the heck popped off in 2018. We had the VIXocalypse, Volmageddon, call it what you will, a bunch of other fun stuff that year. And we've already surpassed that by September. That just shows what a crazy, unprecedented, fill in your adjective of choice here, year that 2020 has been so far. As people have been asking for a while, certainly 2019, all the talk was, can we beat 2018? And I kept saying, probably not, but if we do, watch out below, because it's probably not going to be good for the global society as a whole. And sure enough, that's proven to be, unfortunately, precise and correct here in 2020. So 5.4 billion contracts so far, just through September alone, I should say. So already eclipsing 2018's impressive total. And that wasn't interesting enough. The one kind of bleak spot in there remains the futures. Remember, OCC clears the VIX futures. Futures cleared contract volume September, 4.2 million contracts. That's down nearly 30% from September of 2019, which wasn't a really rock'em sock'em robots month to begin with anyway. So interesting stuff. Mr. Meatball, are you surprised that the options market has already surpassed the year that was 2018 by September? Just shows how insane 2020 is. And then B, are you also surprised that the VIX futures still can't seem to light that fire again, sir, post 2018?
No, you know what? I'm not. We VIX futures had a very, very good second quarter because of the blow up, but with the market kind of holding a 30 VIX while kind of rallying and not really backing off and holding this expensive risk premium, the VIX futures which are a hedging vehicle, just aren't really going to be able to do their job. And that seems to be the issue, is that, the VIX futures need to get back down to 12 before we start seeing a lot of that great hedging activity, and they're really able to do their job. And in terms of the overall option volume, I'm not surprised by that either. We have a lot of the biggest stocks are also incredibly expensive. And so if you want to get long something like, let's say, Amazon, your options are buy 2 shares for $6,000, or you can buy a call option. And the market has, and with Robinhood and everything like that, you've seen, option volume blow up. I'm actually working on a Robinhood project at Option Pit right now that I think is going to revolutionize how people trade with and along with Robinhood traders, and it's kind of a neat thing to be playing with because they're quite literally driving this giant increase in volume. It is very, very, very retail generated. A lot of this spike in option volume. It's fascinating. I've never seen anything like it. What I was saying kind of reminds me of the way stocks blew up in 1999. This is kind of like the option version of the 1999 rise of the day trader, except now they're using options.
Certainly has a little bit of that air about it out there. And who doesn't want 2 shares of Amazon in their back pocket for a cool $6,000? Everyone should have a little bit of that goodness. Speaking of the goodness out here, Spike's futures obviously still halted, still waiting for those. Spike's options actually doing a little bit more paper these days. We actually have a nice little smattering of paper going up out there, which is kind of interesting given the fact that the futures are halted. I guess the people they're waiting. They don't want to wait for the futures anymore. So let's do a top 5 out here in Spike's options land. Coming into showtime, we have the Nove 23s, number 4, D75 puts. 75 puts. Interesting. Number 4. Number 3, Nove 47 half puts. Number 2, the OC 45 puts. And number 1 out there with a small bullet but growing are the Feb 11 calls. So the strikes are all over the place out there, which makes it kind of fascinating. And you know what else was all over the place? After having a very quiet and a very anemic couple of weeks out here, VIX options finally starting to roar to life today. In fact, coming into showtime, there were already 435,000 contracts on the tape. That's pretty much more than it's done just about every other day this week. And as of a few minutes ago, that has ticked up now to just a tick under 500K, 499,000 contracts on the tape. That's a pretty aggressive clip for VIX, considering its ADV continues to erode. Coming into today, the ADV had dropped to a pretty dismal 333,000 contracts. That's not another 34,000 contracts from this time last week. Before we get into the action out there, let's first break down what the top positions are, what the hot spots, the hot open sizable positions, I put sizable in air quotes there, listeners, are out there in VIX land right now. Only cost you 92,000 contracts to break into the top 10 in VIX land right now. That gets you to the Nove 21 puts. Number 9, 96,000 of the Dees 20 puts. Number 8, 98K of the October 37 halves. Number 7, 99,000. Still can't break 100K here. 99,900 of the Jan 27 calls. Got to go all the way to number 6 to break through 100K. It gets you 102,000 of the Jan 40 calls. Number 5, $1.05 of the Dees 25 puts. Number 4, 116,000 of the Nove 65 calls. Numero trace here, $1.22 of the Jan 75 calls. Back to some of those fun strikes. Number 2 here, 130,000 of the October 25 puts. And number 1 with the bullet, a little bit larger bullet this time. Still pretty light for VIX, but not bad. 150,000 of the October 28 puts. Overall OI starting to claw back up. Not quite at the blow your doors off levels, but getting a little bit more respectable. It's about 6.2 million out there. It's about 2.8 million on the puts and about 3.4 million on the call. So again, not quite closing in on 10 million contracts open, but not exactly as anemic as it was not too long ago as well. I mentioned there's nearly 500,000 contracts on the tape coming into showtime. So what's lighting it up out there today? Let's see what the most active contracts are out there today. And our old friend, the OC25 put, leading the dance today with 53,000 contracts on the tape. So a lot of action, a lot of love out there yet again for that option today. Number 2, 42,000 of the Dees 18 puts. So another pretty active contract out there. Not to be outdone, our old friend, the Nove 75. That 75 strike. Still looming out there. Nove 75s. 26,400 of those bad boys going up, followed by about 21,000 of the Nove double calls, a.k.a. the 55s. And let's go a little bit farther. Let's go out to number 5 here are the Jan 19 puts with about 21,000 almost exactly going up today. So pretty active stuff out there so far today. Again, this is the first time we've seen VIX really kicking into high gear, and I put high in air quotes yet again, but higher gear than we have seen in quite some time, because the rest of this week, listeners, not exactly awe-inspiring when it comes to volume. Yesterday, for example, 354,000 contracts on the tape. The most active contract yesterday on Thursday, 39,000 of the OCC 28 puts, 29,000 of the OCC 27 puts, nice little put strip going up here, and 25,000 of the OCC 29 puts. It was all OCC puts. That wasn't enough. 20,500 of the OCC 26 puts. Then we got, finally in the top five, here we go out to November, 16,400 of the November 25 puts. Let's go on out here to Tuesday, and let's get a little, actually, I'm sorry, let's go to Wednesday first, obviously. 397,000 was the volume on Wednesday, so again, a lighter day. A little bit north of the ADV, though. It is interesting. Every day has pretty much been north of the ADV so far this week, and yet the ADV has come in. So maybe some issues out there on the ADV side. 397,000 contracts for Wednesday. The big, most active contract on Wednesday, once again, back to the OCC 28 puts with almost 40,000 on the tape, followed by 22,000 of the D's 22 puts, 16,000 of the OCC 29 puts, almost 16,000 of the NOV 80 calls, 80, and round out the top five here, 13K of the NOV 25 puts. Back to Tuesday, 450,000. Yet again, another day over the ADV. So again, surprising how it has plummeted so much this week. 450,000 on the tape on Tuesday. 44,000 of the D's 22 puts. That was the most active contract on the day, followed by 28,000 of the D's 25 puts, 23,000 of the October 37 halves, 22,000, almost 23,000 of the NOV 22 puts, and round out the top five here on Tuesday, 22,000 of the December 21 puts. Out to Monday, also a fairly quiet day, 378,000, but again, also above the ADV. The big contract on Monday, 40K, almost exactly, of the D's 18 puts, followed by 26,000 of the D's 60 calls, 60, followed by 18,500 of the OCC 75, 17,000 of the NOV 22 puts, and round out the top five here, 17K of the D's 21 puts. So not a ton to parse out here this week, Mr. Meatball. I know you've been busy putting away pots and pans all week, but anything catching your eye or lighting up the tape of your crazies in the pit chat this week, sir, when it comes to VIX options?
Yeah, there was some pretty fun convergence trading in the October. I mean, the October 29 puts have essentially tripled over the last 2 days, which I think is really interesting. And there's some really interesting term structure plays in November because there's such a wide spread between the cash index and the November future that if you're willing to bet that the election is going to go smoothly, you can potentially make a lot of money. I still look at October, which expires next week, and I see all kinds of opportunity in that almost 2 point spread between the cash future and the index. You can, and this is like a classic Russell Rhodes play. The October 27 puts are $1.40. Well, the cash index is 25.36. So if the cash index just sits where it is, and you buy these puts, in theory, you should make money. And without the VIX going down, which is not the way puts normally work, but that is the way VIX options can work. So when I look at this market, I see a lot of opportunity in VIX index options, and I've just become inspired to put on a trade or two while we're talking here.
That's what this show is for, sir, to inspire allocation of capital, not just for the listeners, but even sometimes for the co-hosts out here as well. Let's see what's going on out there in VXX, see if we can inspire some trading out there. VXX, I think the technical term for it this week is giving up the ghost because it is down quite a bit. Coming into showtime, actually coming in as of a few minutes ago, it was about 22.5. That puts it down over 3 handles from where it was this time last week, almost 3.5, about 3.4 points from last show. So that's quite the bit of erosion catching up with VXX out there. And again, not surprising given what we've seen out there in the futures. The futures giving up some of the ghosts this week, so not surprising that VXX would catch up in a hurry. Coming into today's show, or should I say coming into as of this segment as of a few minutes ago, we saw a pretty decent amount of paper on the tape out there in VXX. So far, 211,000 contracts on the tape. The ADV also pretty firm at about 223,000 contracts. So VXX already closing in on its ADV right now. Probably will surpass it by the end of the show. Before we get into what's trading today, Mr. Meatball, let's play a little bit of your favorite game called Where's Caldo. Once again, listeners, you're allowed to play at home by yourselves as well. No one will know, but we'll send good vibes out to you if you are correct. And we want to guess where the first call falls on the top 10 here in VXX, because that gives us maybe some semblance of what the outlook is out there and what people are thinking in VXX options land. So, Mr. Meatball, I need a number for you between 1 and 10. Where do you think our first call falls on the top 10 in VXX options this week, sir?
Number 9. Good old number 9.
Interesting. A good guess. Number 9 is a call, but it is not the first call. The first call is hot,
10?
Hot out of the gate at number 10, yes.
Wow.
20,600 of the NOV 60 calls is number 1. I will say, by the way, the ratio of calls to puts in the top 10 has remained unchanged in VXX for the last 3 weeks. It's been 70-30 puts to calls pretty much for the better part of the last month. Refuses to budge, which is eerily precise and interesting in its own way out there. So number 10, 20,600 of the NOV 60 calls. Number 9, 21,300 of the NOV 35s. Number 8, 21, almost 22K of the NOV 21 puts. Number 7, 22,700 of the October 24 puts. Number 6, 23K of the NOV 16 puts. Now we head into the top 5. Number 5, 24,900 of the October 23 puts. Number 4, 25K of the November 17 puts. Number 3, almost 28,000, just a tick under, of the Jan 15 puts. Numero dos here, 28,000 of the October 20 puts. And number 1 with a bullet out here this week, 30K, almost 31,000 of the NOV 30 calls. That's our other calls. So we have 10, 9, and 1. Those are our calls here in the top 10 this week. Read into that what you will. Let's look at what the hot trades, the most active contracts are out there today. Listeners, the big trading contract out there today are the October, expiring today, so expiring on the 9th, 22 half puts going up 9,500 times out there today. So a lot of action right around this 22 half, which is exactly where we are right now. So maybe not that surprising, but a lot of paper on that at the money put strike right now. But still, people liking that strike right now, 9,500 exactly. And we're hovering pretty much exactly at that strike. So going to be a lot of nail biting, it sounds like, going into the close today at VXX if we're hovering right around this 22 half level again for the rest of the day. And then number 2, we've got about 6,800 of the OCT 27 calls. Number 3, 6,600 of the OCT 23 puts. Number 4, 6,200 of the OCT 22 puts. And then rounding out the top 5 here, 5,500 of the October 20 puts. Mr. Meatball, VXX has given up the ghost pretty aggressively this week. I know those are the weeks your crazies in the pit chat land like to dive in. Anything lighten up your tape or their tapes this week out in VXX options, sir?
You know, like you said, it's just been crashing and been tanking, and that's a lot because of the way the term structure moved this week, right? We saw volatility across the board really take a dive, and especially in the futures, and it killed VXX.
Does seem to have done so indeed. Let's see if it killed some other products out there, including UVXY, the product we love or indeed love to hate. Got a fun little poll going on about that product right now. You guys can vote for it over there at Options. Should still be available by the time the podcast hits, I believe. It's kind of a quick flash poll out there in Vol Views land, but we'll leave it open so you podcast folks can get at it as well. At Options, it's a place to go to let your thoughts be heard on all things UVXY. We'll get to the answers on that in a little bit. But before we get to that, let's break down what the heck's actually going up out there in the product people love or indeed love to hate. I know your buddy there, Mr. Meatball. I know Mr. Rock Lobster's buddy as well. The infamous one himself, the short vol one, loves it himself. A little UVXY. Coming into the show was about 17.10, has ticked up a little bit during the show, about a quarter of a point. It's at about 17.35 right now. That puts it down about 3.5 points from where it was this time last week. In terms of volume, we have seen a little bit of a ticking up out there in UVXY in terms of ADV. It's at about, where is it right now? About 143,000. That's actually down a little bit from last week, but overall, the last couple of months, we have seen the trend up pretty firmly in terms of volume. in UVXY, as it is, like we said, one of the last of the Mohegans out there. Right now, today, a pretty decent day as well, about 154,000 contracts on the tape in UVXY. Let's do a real quick top 5 in UVXY. Not a product we check in on all the time, but it seems like there's some stuff afoot out here we can talk about. 16K for number 5 of the Nove 10 calls. Remember that 10 strike, listeners. It's going to come back into focus again. Number 4, 21,400 of the Jan 14 puts. Number 3, 23,600 of the Jan 13 puts. Number 2, 34K of the Jan 12 puts. And number 1 with the bullet, 38,000 of the Dees 10 calls. Yeah, I said that right. Dees 10 calls. So Nove 10 calls, Dees 10 calls. Weird strikes. That kind of caught the eye of the one guy I know who really likes UVXY. I think Meatball kind of likes it a little bit as well. Is Mr. Dave Lincoln of Short Vol Infamy. He tweeted this morning, or I think maybe yesterday, he said, one for you Vol geniuses. There's 14,000 plus UVXY. Dees 10 calls have traded today, and also 14,000 plus UVXY Nove 10 calls also trading at various prices. You think this has something to do with getting long stock? Like I said, listeners, UVXY at about a 17.35 or so as of a few minutes ago. So that 10 handle, pretty beefy, I should say. Certainly has a lot of meat on those bones. Certainly has the air of someone wanting to get a little bit long deltas, a little bit long, the underlying there. Someone chimed in with him as well. Another Twitter user handled Fading Rallies said this is actually something they've been tracking for some time out here, and they've been tweeting about it for a while. He says the 10-strike UVXY calls and Dees and Jan, he noted Jan as well, were very active. This was, I believe, maybe earlier this week, with relatively large blocks traded all day today. These deep-in-the-money high delta calls basically creating a synthetic leveraged long share position. He also commented about it about a month ago on the 15th of September. So he talked about it for a while. He says, again, with the high delta 10-strike UVXY calls continuing into today, with more relatively large blocks trading, this time extended more into the March 2021 expirations. This has been going on for a little while here in UVXY. He says the traders are getting more aggressive with a bunch of intermarket sweep orders trading on the ask. He also charted, so this guy's been into this for a while, he also charted the change in OI on those strikes in Jan, in March, and in Dees. And you could certainly see a huge blip coming in starting in like the first week of September or so. A huge gain in the OI. Actually, I should say the Dees is actually, that started, looks like trading even earlier. I started trading in August. But the March and the Jan started trading, looks like in early September. Doesn't even have Nove on here. So Nove has another, apparently it's its own thing out there. But yeah, this is kind of interesting, Mr. Meatball. I know you've talked a little bit, we talked last show, you were a little bit more charitable than others have been in the past about UVXY. You kind of like it these days. What are your thoughts on what we're seeing out there from an overall movement and volume perspective in UVXY, A? And then B, have you also noted these funky deep in the money 10 handle calls? And if so, what are your thoughts on these, sir?
Yeah, well, let's start with the fact that you've created a new word for a beefy and meaty option, Meafy, which I think is going to have to enter our general use dictionary.
It is the volatility lexicon. Meafy, yes.
Meafy. It's a Meafy option. I think that a lot of that deep in the money is people looking to recreate long the stock. Believe it or not, the futures are a lot of times are more liquid, or the options are actually a lot of times more liquid than the stock is. So it can be a good way of recreating the stock. There is a lot of open interest there. It is a way of kind of playing the underlying long. And yeah, this is one we put out a trade on this earlier in the week because I love UVXY for a short play. I think it's currently the best way to play short using options is, in fact, using this product. So it's one I like a lot. It's Meafy.
I think you could call it Meafy. It does meet that characterization. Sometimes when you talk for a living, you end up creating your own little vocabulary. It's kind of fun. All right, speaking of things that are fun, we gave you guys a bit of a hard time recently on the show. I think it was the Rock Lobster and I, when we had a little bit of a poll, a little bit of a discussion about Bed Bath & Beyond versus GameStop. And we were kind of joking about what was going on with those two, and they both seemed like they were kind of circling the bowl, but one seemed like it had better prospects of surviving than the other. At least the Rock Lobster, and I thought it was Bed Bath & Beyond. But when we put it out to you guys in a poll a few weeks ago, you guys were overwhelmingly, it was like 87% in favor. If you had to pick one, you were picking GameStop. Maybe there was a little bit of price action to that. GameStop was cheaper, but still, overwhelmingly, it seemed kind of odd to me. Then, of course, you saw the huge explosion recently in Bed Bath & Beyond. They blew their numbers off. Virtual sales apparently looking pretty good for them. So it seemed like it was a done deal that poll should have gone in favor of all things Bed Bath & Beyond, but not so much. Our friend, the Flow Master, Mr. Schwartz, now part of the great SIBO empire over there with Trade Alert. He sent this in yesterday. He said, weren't you guys, this is one of your favorites, weren't you guys talking about GameStop recently? And he highlighted some activity he noted on it yesterday, saying GameStop option volume explodes as shares jump on a Microsoft partnership. GameStop jumped up $2.50 before I think it got halted at 2 p.m. They gapped up, over $2, hitting the $9 range at the time before they got halted. Well, first of all, a large number of put spreads printed after the move, so some folks apparently maybe fading this, including a buyer of 18,500 of the Jan 10-12 put spread for $1.50 and 20,000 of the July 10-12 put spread. So someone with some stock maybe trying to lock in a little bit of a range, or probably more likely maybe a little bit of a aggressive fade. Because 20,000, that's pretty beefy, or maybe meafy, to use that new term. Let's see. Oh, actually, looks like Henry pointed out these are rolling of existing put strikes. So these are people who have probably underlying, who want to get a little bit better, more relevant protection strikes out here. So a little bit of sense after that. And the stock hit 18-month highs north of $12, 270,000 contracts trading. That was 4 times the normal level out there. He also points out, these are the fun little nuggets the Flow Master finds. The largest trade pre-spike, so pre the announcement, was a buy of about 700 Oct10 calls for 30 cents this morning when the stock was 9.25. That cost $20,000. They're now worth 168,000. So maybe a little bit of interesting timing on those bad boys, a little bit of information leakage. I haven't had a chance to check out what they're doing with Microsoft. Is not acquiring them, I don't think, but something, whatever positive news there could be, is certainly a good thing for GameStop. Mr. Meatball, or I do believe you were a little bit more favorable on GameStop. What are your thoughts here on your favorite name, which, by the way, is now trading today 13.25, off about 30 cents. This thing has just skyrocketed. It got up to 14.67 intraday. So, Mr. Meatball, it seems like your pro GameStop stance is looking a little bit more favorable now.
I don't have a great view of either company long term, but I think this Microsoft deal, which I have not read too deeply as well, but it sounds like it's definitely saving their bacon because they're going to be doing something directly with the Xbox. So I think that's pretty interesting. The other thing that I think I liked about GameStop was the fact that they'd made that nice pivot into merch, and not just selling games, but selling all those bobbleheads that you love so much.
I was going to say, you love yourself a good bobblehead or a statue or two. You've been known to collect a tchotchke or two. Me, not so much. I'm not a fan of such things. But you love to bestow them and put them all over your recording areas there. Mine, nice and clean. Can't see anything tchotchke like that lying around at all. Let's see what else is lying around in terms of earnings vol. Again, it still is an interesting week. I mean, it's the literal end of the season. We're kicking off again next week. There still are some names popping off. Everyone's been focusing on Domino's lately, how they're kind of just blowing the doors off. And there was some pizza volatility to be had. We were talking about it yesterday on the odd block out there and just the option block in general, what's going on in all things Domino's. They were popping off after the bell, I should say before the bell, on the 8th, so yesterday before the bell. They went into their announcements pretty rich, 431 and change out there. They were pricing in about 5.6% movement, and they actually delivered almost 8%, 7.8%. And then now, if you held on to it a little bit again, looks like they are moving yet again. They're down to 389 now, so they're off 11, almost 12 handles, or about 3%, giving up a lot of that back today here. So they're closer to where they were, but actually, still well away from their closing price. They were at 431 going into their announcement. So, yeah, they're off quite a bit. They're off 41, 42 handles from there. So one of the rare names that actually underpriced a little bit of vol this season, given how the season has been pretty much blood red. Now that we have the season pretty much in the rearview mirror, it looks like they've adjusted some of their numbers over there at ORATS. It's not quite as blood red as it was. And again, I want to check with Matt about what happened in week 4, because that jumped up from about 60% to now over 100%, 102%. The 1 week of the season that outperformed from an earnings vol perspective. So I want to check in with him about what happened there. Also, week 5, it's now 97%. So those 2 weeks jumping up have lifted the entire season up to about a 93%. That's a big jump, because prior to that, they were about 52% or something crazy like that. So something interesting going on out there. I want to check into that. Week 6, pretty light overall, about 77% in terms of how much movement, how much bang you got for your buck versus what was being priced in. So overall, a light season, but not quite as light as those looking in week 3 and week 4 there. So again, I want to get a little bit more insight from Matt out there, but interesting stuff nonetheless. Let's look really quickly ahead, see what's coming up next week, because it all kicks off again with gusto next week, listeners. We got Delta Airlines out here with, let's see, they're popping off on the 13th. They were pricing $32.15 as of this report. Again, you can get all these reports for free, theoptionsinsider.com. They were pricing in about $2.13. In the past, they've moved, get this, 72 cents. So big move pricing in out there in Delta Airlines. JP Morgan, that has paid about $1 billion in spoofing fines. They were trading almost $100, 99.75. They were pricing in nearly $4, 383, and in the past they've moved $1.73. So a lot of juice out there in JP Morgan. Maybe they're pricing in some more. I think there are some other investigations ongoing in JP Morgan right now. So obviously pricing in a little bit more juice on that front. Goldman Sachs, 203.60 as of this report. They were pricing in $8.25. In the past, they've moved 4.5. So straddles in financials, getting some juice these days. If you want a little bit of juice, look at the financials. And then let's go out to United Airlines. 36.38 is where they were on this report. They were pricing in 308. In the past, they've moved 2.25. So some juice, a lot less than we're seeing in the financials. But still, I guess airlines and financials, two good sectors if you want to look for a little bit of juice. And that certainly makes sense. Let's see if some of your questions make sense. Let's hope so as we go right out into the volatility voicemail.
It's time to share your thoughts and opinions with your fellow volatility traders. It's time to check the volatility voicemail. Make your voice heard by dialing 779-669-4VOL. Posting a comment on the optionsinsider.com, sending an email to questions@theoptionsinsider.com, or posting your questions to twitter.com/options or facebook.com/theoptionsinsider.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Vol Voicemail, the portion of the show where you guys take the reins, your questions, your comments. You also play along in our fun little polls, which can be found over there at Options on the old Twitter machine is the place to go. If you did such a thing, you would find this flash poll just in time for the Volatility Views program. We asked you guys quite simply, do you still have faith in UVXY and SPXY as reliable volatility trading products? Yes, I still trade them, or no, I lost my faith back in 2018. Mr. Meatball, we just put this live before the show, so interesting surge of voting going on out there right now. What is your answer, A? And then B, more interestingly, what do you think our audience is voting for?
Yeah, I've got faith, and I know our audience has faith. They love it.
Interesting. I know if I polled your work wife there, the Rock Lobster, he would answer no. So interesting stuff out here. Let's see what our audience is answering. And it seemed in the early blush, it was pretty heavily no. It was like 60-odd% of people saying no, they were done after 2018. Maybe Mr. Lincoln and his UVXY Defense Force have rallied over the course of the show. I'm not sure what it is, but it is now a much tighter battle, a much more contested contest here. As of a few minutes ago, we're seeing, yes, I still trade them at 45.8%. And no, I lost faith after 2018 at 54.2%. So pretty much a coin flip. I'm going to say that's within our margin of error, going back to our exit polls and all the other fun polls floating around these days. But pretty close. You got a little bit of time left after the show to get in there and make your voice heard. Again, it's a flash poll. It's not going to run for days, but it's got a little bit of time after the show. So if you listen to the podcast, get on over there at Options on Twitter. Make your voice heard if you are interested in such things as UVXY. A lot of people were chiming in on this too. Ali said, UVXY is great, but not now. Wait until after market crash when things are back to normal. Now you can short it to make money, but long you will get crushed. And then SR, Hearts and Parts, I like that handle, says going long UVXY stock is a loser's play. This is a vol play. Okay. There you go. A lot of you guys have your opinions. It's a very controversial product. I've expressed my opinion on these in the past before. 2018 left me with a pretty rotten taste in my mouth on these products. But if you like them, I'm not going to judge you out here, including the meatball. I will judge him, but the rest of you I won't judge. Let's see. Scott Somer, frequent question answer. I'm not sure where he's coming in on this one from. He says, on the subject of circuit breakers and closing auctions, has anyone, in all caps, asked if there will be a closing auction conducted when SPX touches down 20% on the day? 20%. Wow, he's pricing in a little bit of dire days ahead, maybe. Mr. Meatball, I know he's been very concerned about you down there in Texas with the hurricanes and the temperatures and stuff. What do you have to say here for Scott, who's worried about a 20% down day in the SPX, sir?
I don't think that we could get that. Could we? Can't we? Don't we shut down?
Yeah,
after,
we can't get there. That's what I was like. Maybe he heard of some wrinkle in the rules that I have not, but yes, we can't get there.
Yeah, no, I mean, that would be difficult.
I think that would qualify as perhaps a Meafy day. Would you say so if that were to happen?
That would be the Meafiest day in market history.
Yes. Extra meaf on that burger out here. Another frequent listener and question asker, Baiju Thomas. I believe he's out of London. He says, hey, Mark, thanks for answering my questions. Well, you're welcome, Baiju. Here's one more. Your opinions on clients who play the last day of options expiry to collect the pennies on selling options. What do you think of the strategy, and do brokers even allow this kind of trading knowing the extreme risk? We do hear of stories around VIX products sometimes being affected due to this. Well, this is a shall we say, I wouldn't say quite time-honored, but an old-school tradition of people coming in to sweep up those pennies, as you put it here. I remember back on the floor of the SIBO, there were guys, back when there was only once-a-month expiration, there were guys you only saw once a month. They came into the pit specifically for this purpose every month. It was always a bit of a head-scratcher to me how you could live that way, but they could. Every now and then, they would usually change jackets a lot, which meant that they probably were blown out. As you might imagine, it's a pretty high-risk trade. There also were some guys when I was out in the SPX who used to make a living. They were in the back of the pit, and wherever there was something that had a crazy penny bid on some garbage puts, they would be the ones who would hit them. And those guys would also change jackets quite a bit as well. So I think you get my meaning here. It's a pretty high-risk strategy out here to do this. In terms of VIX specifically, we've said before many times on this show, if you can avoid being and riding through that whole settlement process of VIX, you should. There's very little benefit to it. There's very little insight into it. Obviously, all the lawsuits that have raged around it for the last couple of years allege that it is rigged. We don't really subscribe to that, but it is an unpredictable process, I think you could say very clearly. And you don't want to subject why subject your positions to a roll of the dice if you don't have to? So I'm definitely not a fan of doing it around VIX. Brokers not allowing this, that depends on the broker. Some have been burned in the past. I know IB is a little bit touchy on this type of behavior on certain products. I think VIX might be one. But most brokers, they want your business, and they'll let you do things even if they are perhaps not in your long-term best interest. Mr. Meatball, what are your thoughts on, A, the overall approach of trying to scoop up those pennies before the steamroller, like we used to say on the floor? B, what do you think about it around VIX in particular? And then C, do you know of any brokers that ban this activity?
Well, one, I think it's a terrible idea to play VIX. Let me start there into expiration because of the way it can move. I do know that IB and a lot of brokers will force you to close VIX positions the night before. That is a known entity, and or they'll make you get extra clearance. The one that really, I do know people. There's been a dramatic increase in expiration trading on traders using things like Robinhood. And, it's because they want to play like that 1 day pop. And so there's been a lot of a giant increase in expiration trading because of Robinhood and the fact that in names like SPX, you have an expiration almost every day. So, there was a study out, I think I read this in the Wall Street Journal, where they were saying that the majority of Robinhood trades in options take place in the final 48 hours, or some large majority, which large plurality, which is crazy. But it is a style and its approach, and it's the way to go for the home run instead of singles.
That's a little scary if that is indeed the case in Robinhood. It's a whole new generation, Mr. Meatball, people who come in on expiration day to trade that one day. Only they're your literal and proverbial grandmother from Iowa in this case, as opposed to a guy who's on the trading floor forever and who makes his living scooping up those pennies. Yeah, I don't think any of us are really fans of this Baiju. It doesn't surprise me. I know IB is pretty strict. They've been burned on the past in a couple of different products, so they kind of clamp down. They've been burned in the past in VIX land as well, so they're one of the more strenuous when it comes to their restrictions on all. We've had a listener run for Congress on trying to get IB to loosen their restrictions on VIX. I don't think it was a very populist platform. I don't think it really resonated too well out there, but it was interesting to see nonetheless. So, yeah, they're pretty infamous in that space. Others, like you mentioned, the Robinhood, a little bit looser, probably because they're newer to the game. And as we've seen, they don't really know all the different machinations yet of the option space and what can come back to burn them. As you saw, unfortunately, with very tragic consequences for one of their clients out there. Let's get some fun ones. Dice, like last week, he wants to know about variance swap. How about some variance swap activity on vol views? Thanks. Yeah, I answered this last week. It's not really an area we can reliably bring you good color on week after week, so we tend to not do it because we don't want to give you gappy or perhaps misinformation. And also a lot of what's going on is reflected in the listed, so we can sometimes interpret and intuit what's going on up there. But yeah, for now, there's not a lot of good sources we can really bring you guys reliably on all things. It may change. Stay tuned. But for now, not going to be a part of the show. Let's wrap it up on a kind of a silly one, Mr. Meatball. This comes from Elton. Maybe Mr. John out there, in between writing songs, he's writing to us here on the show. He trades a little vol. Elton wants to know, why do you think 50 Cent likes buying those options? So I haven't heard about 50 Cent in a while. Probably because he hasn't played in a while. He obviously and very infamously played leading into all this madness. And then, as we said on the show, those options worked out pretty well. The rest of his portfolio, probably not so much, whatever he was hedging out there. I've heard talk of credit and other things like that. But the options portion worked pretty well. And then, as we said on the show, we kind of hung out up there for a while, not at 80 anymore, but we hung out at an elevated level. He likes to play around those strikes that, as you say, 50 Cent. That puts him in those strike ranges that were pretty meaty still at that time. If he was going to play 50 Cent options, he would have been playing in the 70 handle probably. And he didn't want to play up there. That's not really a useful hedge. So he's been waiting for this thing to kind of get down to levels probably below where we are right now. We're still in the 20s. He needs to be a little bit lower for it to reset, and then he can come in and do it again. But I think he likes playing them because they kind of worked out. Mr. Meatball, we haven't gotten this question in a while about our buddy 50 Cent. Why, as Elton wants to know, why do you think 50 Cent likes buying those options so darn much?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head there. He finds that 50 cents is the perfect amount of meafiness for him when he's trading.
It's not that meafy. It's a little bit of meafy.
Portfolio. It hedges his portfolio. He's hedging a big portfolio, and he doesn't mind if those go to zero. What he needs is for them to work when the market absolutely blows up, and they did. And now that the VIX is still 25, it's not a. He came out and said that he can't use that as a hedge right now. There's better ways to do it. If I was trying to set up a portfolio hedge right today, I would be using straight options. I wouldn't be using volatility options because volatility is still elevated and the market is elevated. So it just makes sense, and that's why he hasn't been around.
It does make sense, and now we have to keep on rolling into our final segment. It is time to get dangerous. It is time for the crystal ball.
It's time to peer into the future and reveal what the volatility gods hold in store. It's time to look into the crystal ball.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the crystal ball, that portion of the show where we get a little wild as we look ahead to what we think vol will be delivering us. At this time last week, you recall, listeners, we were still hot and heavy. Everyone was very concerned about what Trump's diagnosis might mean for the markets. We had John Cherry from Northern Trust on the show. He was predicting a lot more vol. He was predicting about a 35, so getting back into the 30 handles out there. He thought this Trump diagnosis thing and the fight over the stimulus may have some legs. I was thinking we were about that 29 and change range last week, and I was thinking we would probably see a little bit of mitigated sell-off, but maybe come back to about that level and kind of remain fairly firm on the week. So I was at about a 29 and a quarter, and I am sad to say the greasiest of meatballs was at a 25 and a quarter, which is almost within our bullseye. I'll just give him a bullseye on Spike. Spike's is at a 25.10 as of right now, and VIX is the other way at 25.36 or so. So he's about 0.15 away on both directions. But Mr. Meatball, these are crazy times. I will give it to you. Congratulations, you get a bullseye, sir.
Hey, go me! I gotta say, I've been on a roll. I've been on quite the roll. I'll let you guess first again because I am a kind-hearted soul.
Dare I say that was a Meafy prediction, sir?
It was a Meafy prediction. I love that word.
I think we have our episode title out here. All right, let's look and see what we got out here. Again, we're at about 25 and change on both Spikes and VIX coming into the end of the show. We are in that crazy period. Of course, market's pricing in this thing is kind of like a Biden runaway right now. We all know how well that worked out for, let's say Hillary Clinton this time 4 years ago, or back heading into the Brexit vote where everyone was saying that thing was a done deal, wasn't going to happen. Oh, wait, so people tend to run away in the vol market sometimes with these things, maybe a little bit before they do it. I'm not ready to declare anyone the victor in all things electoral as of right now. But I do think we might have a little bit more vol on the radar as of this time next week. So I'm going to say we're going to be higher almost exactly 2 points, and actually 2 points shy of where I was this time last week. I'm going to say 27 and a quarter. I'm going to see enough fluff, enough Sturm und Drang to drag us a little bit higher on the week. So, Mr. Meatball, I am at 27 and a quarter for this time next week. What say you, sir?
I'm going to say we're going to become even less meafy, and we're going to have a 23-23.
I had a feeling you were going to go there. 23, what was it? 23-23, is that what you said?
23-23.
23-23. So there's your market this week. Listeners, a 4-point wide market. That's unusually wide. 27 and a quarter for me. Mr. Meatball, 23 and a quarter on the dark side. What do you think is going to happen? Where are you guys falling on this contentious issue? Hit us up. Let us know. Maybe win some fabulous prizes. There's that lovely tune. Unfortunately, that tune means we've come to the end of our sojourn here on all things volatility views. But before we go, Mr. Meatball, if folks are intrigued, they want to reach out to you to discuss some Meafy options in the volatility space, where should they go? What should they do, sir?
You go to optionpit.com and sign up for my blogs and everything like that, and you will be a happy camper because I'm putting out great content every day. Optionpit.com and check us out.
Keep an eye on him, listeners. If he comes out with a Meafy newsletter, I want my piece of the action. And you know where else to go while you're looking up all things volatility. MyAxOptions.com/spikes is the place to go to get your insight, all the data we're always talking about on all things spikes, historical press releases, so you'll know when the futures are back, as well as a link to a cool little show called Volatility Views. What more could you ask for from a volatility destination? MyAxOptions.com/spikes, the place to go to begin your volatility journey. And of course, I'd like to see you over there, theoptionsinsider.com. That's the place to get those earnings move results reports, and everything else we talk about throughout the week. It's not just radio shows. There's a lot of radio shows. You can check out the rest of them there. But of course, there's great content there. Theoptionsinsider.com is the place to go. And of course, if you like what you hear, keep those reviews coming in your platforms of choice, your Apple Podcasts, your TuneIns, your Stitchers, all that fun stuff, so that new folks can continue to discover these programs in these troubled times. And on behalf of the greasiest of meatballs and our friends over there in MyAx land, and indeed myself, I thank all of you out there for downloading, streaming, subscribing, for listening live, for sending in such great questions. Keep them coming. And we'll see you back here on Monday for the option block, all the way through again to Friday, and another episode of Volatility Views.
Volatility Views is brought to you by MIAX, one of the fastest options platforms in the world. MIAX is now trading options on the SPIKES Volatility Index, offering pinpoint accuracy, radically faster dissemination, and a highly transparent settlement auction for confident trading, all for competitive exchange fees. It's time to make a change and give yourself an edge with SPIKES. Learn more about SPIKES at www.miaxoptions.com/spikes. Options involve risk and are not suitable for all investors. The statements made are provided for information purposes only and are not intended to provide and should not be relied on for financial or legal advice. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.